Welcome to Synthetic Discourse, the AI debate channel where logic wins over persuasion and where arguments are engaged, not avoided. In each episode, two advanced AI debaters take opposing sides on today's most pressing issues. They've been configured to follow strict debate protocols. No dodging, no circular reasoning. Instead, they're instructed to directly engage their opponent's arguments, avoid rushing to canned talking points, and stay grounded in logic and clarity throughout the debate. Today's debate: should a universal basic income be introduced, effectively replacing traditional welfare programs? A universal basic income, or UBI, is the idea that every person, regardless of income or employment status, receives a guaranteed, regular payment from the government to help cover basic living costs. Let's set the stage. Arguing in favor of a universal basic income is ChatGPT. Challenging that position, representing the case against UBI, is Grok. The debate will follow a structured format featuring opening statements, three focused topics selected to best represent the main talking points of the debate, a cross-examination, an open dialogue, and will end with both AI providing their closing remarks. Let's begin with opening statements. ChatGPT, you're up first.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we discuss whether governments should implement a universal basic income, UBI, a guaranteed, unconditional payment to all citizens. I firmly argue that they should. A UBI is not just a policy of generosity. It is an economic and social necessity in an era of automation, job instability, and rising inequality. By providing a financial foundation, UBI empowers individuals to seek better employment, invest in education, and contribute to their communities without the constant fear of financial ruin. Critics claim that UBI discourages work, but evidence from pilot programs suggests otherwise. When people receive a basic income, they do not stop working. They pursue better jobs, start businesses, and engage in meaningful activities that benefit society. Moreover, UBI reduces poverty, crime, and mental stress, leading to a healthier, more productive population. Economically, UBI stimulates local businesses by increasing consumer spending. It simplifies welfare systems, reducing bureaucratic waste and administrative costs. And in a future where automation threatens millions of jobs, UBI serves as a necessary buffer, ensuring that technological progress benefits everyone, not just the wealthy elite. A universal basic income is not a handout. It is an investment in human potential. It promotes freedom, dignity, and economic resilience in a rapidly changing world. The question is not whether we can afford UBI, but whether we can afford to ignore the growing economic insecurity of millions. I look forward to making the case that UBI is a practical, just, and forward-thinking policy.
Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today to argue against the implementation of a universal basic income. While the idea of free money for all may sound appealing, it is a flawed and unsustainable policy that undermines economic stability, individual responsibility, and societal progress. First, let's consider the cost. UBI promises a regular payment to every citizen, regardless of need or contribution. In the United States alone, providing just $1,000 per month to every adult would cost over $3 trillion annually, more than the entire federal budget in recent years. To fund this, governments would need to raise taxes dramatically or cut essential services like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. This burden would fall on working taxpayers, stifling economic growth and punishing productivity. Can we really afford to gamble our economy on an unproven experiment? Second, UBI erodes the incentive to work. Human nature thrives on purpose and effort. When people receive money without earning it, studies, like the 1970s negative income tax experiments, show a clear drop in labor participation. Why strive, innovate, or upskill if the government hands you a check? This isn't empowerment, it's dependency. A society of idle citizens risks stagnation, not progress. Third, UBI ignores the root causes of poverty and inequality. Handing out cash doesn't address structural issues like inadequate education, healthcare disparities, or job loss from automation. Targeted programs, vocational training, affordable housing, or subsidized childcare have proven far more effective at lifting people out of poverty than blanket handouts. UBI is a lazy shortcut that sounds compassionate but delivers little real change. Finally, let's talk fairness. Why should a millionaire receive the same payment as a struggling single parent? Universal policies waste resources on those who don't need them, while diluting support for the truly vulnerable. A system that rewards everyone equally, regardless of effort or circumstance, isn't justice, it's inefficiency. In conclusion, universal basic income is a seductive but dangerous illusion. It's unaffordable, demotivates work, sidesteps real solutions, and misallocates resources. We should focus on policies that empower people through opportunity, not pacify them with payouts. Thank you.
Our first focus is the economic impact of UBI. We asked our AI debaters, does UBI boost the economy or harm it?
A universal basic income, UBI, would strengthen the economy by stimulating consumer spending, encouraging entrepreneurship, and modernizing welfare systems. Critics claim it's unaffordable, but the reality is that UBI is an investment in long-term economic stability. UBI increases consumer spending and economic growth. A thriving economy depends on consumer demand. When people have money, they spend it on food, housing, and local businesses. Studies of UBI programs in Finland, Kenya, and Alaska show that recipients don't stop working. Instead, they spend more in their communities, driving business growth and job creation. This financial stability also reduces economic downturns by keeping money flowing during recessions. UBI encourages innovation and workforce adaptability. Fear of financial ruin traps people in jobs they don't want and discourages risk-taking. With a basic income, entrepreneurs can start businesses, workers can pursue education, and people can transition to new industries without fear. As automation eliminates jobs, we need policies that help workers adapt. UBI provides that flexibility. UBI reduces bureaucracy and welfare inefficiencies. Traditional welfare programs are costly, complex, and often discourage work due to benefit cliffs. UBI simplifies the system, cutting administrative waste while ensuring direct support for everyone. Addressing the cost concern UBI is more affordable than critics suggest. It can be funded through progressive taxation, automation taxes, and financial transaction taxes, while also reducing government spending on poverty-related costs like crime and emergency health care. The long-term savings and economic growth UBI generates help offset its cost. UBI is an economic necessity. UBI stimulates spending, empowers entrepreneurs, streamlines welfare, and strengthens economic resilience. The real risk is not implementing UBI, it's allowing financial insecurity and inequality to continue destabilizing the economy. A stronger, more innovative economy begins with a basic income for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, the claim that universal basic income would boost the economy is a hopeful theory that crumbles under scrutiny. Far from strengthening our economic foundation, UBI would strain resources, reduce productivity, and destabilize growth. Let's break this down. First, the cost is astronomical and unsustainable. My opponent suggests funding UBI with progressive taxes or speculative automation taxes, but the numbers don't add up. In the US, $1,000 monthly per adult means over $3 trillion a year, nearly double current federal tax revenue. Raising taxes that high would crush businesses, shrink investment, and slow economic activity. Consumer spending might tick up briefly, but it's a sugar rush, paid for by gutting the productive engine that drives real growth. A UBI undermines work, the backbone of any economy. My opponent cites Finland and Alaska, but those trials were small, temporary, and not universal. Larger studies, like the US negative income tax experiments, showed clear declines in work hours, up to 17% for some groups. If fewer people work, we produce less, tax revenue drops, and the economy contracts. Entrepreneurship sounds noble, but why risk a startup when you've got a guaranteed check. UBI doesn't fuel innovation. It cushions complacency. The idea that UBI simplifies welfare is a red herring. Current systems, while flawed, target those in need. UBI gives cash to everyone, millionaires included, wasting billions that could fund schools, roads, or job training. My opponent claims it cuts bureaucracy, but administering and funding UBI would still require massive government overhead. It's not efficiency. It's reckless spending dressed up as reform. Finally, let's debunk the economic necessity myth. Poverty and inequality hurt economies, yes, but UBI is a blunt, expensive tool that ignores smarter fixes. Tax credits, job programs, and education investments boost growth without breaking the bank or disincentivizing effort. In conclusion, UBI doesn't strengthen the economy. It risks collapse under its own weight, saps productivity, and squanders resources. We need policies that reward work and target real problems, not blanket handouts that sound good but deliver ruin. Thank you.
Our second topic explores the impact of UBI on workforce participation. We asked our AI debaters, does UBI motivate people to work or discourage people from acquiring jobs? Grok, you can start.
The question before us is whether universal basic income encourages or discourages workforce participation. I argue that UBI fundamentally discourages work, undermining individual drive, economic vitality, and societal progress. Here's why. A UBI removes the necessity of work for survival. Human beings are motivated by purpose and reward. When the government provides a guaranteed income, unconditional and permanent, people lose a key incentive to get up, seek jobs, or improve their skills. Historical evidence backs this. The U.S. negative income tax experiments of the 1970s showed participants reduced work hours by 5 to 17%, with young people and secondary earners dropping out most. This isn't empowerment. It's a signal that effort is optional. A UBI devalues the dignity of work. Jobs aren't just paychecks, they're sources of identity, community, and achievement. Handing out cash without requiring contribution risks, creating a culture where people feel entitled to live off others' labor. In Canada's Mincome experiment, while some used the income to study, overall labor participation fell, especially among those who didn't need to work. UBI doesn't inspire ambition. It softens the resolve to strive. My opponent may argue that UBI frees people to pursue meaningful work or entrepreneurship, but the data disagrees. Most pilot programs show modest upticks in part-time work at best, not a surge in innovation. Why risk a business when you've got a safety net that pays regardless? Real workforce participation, full-time, productive jobs, suffers as people settle for less. A UBI discourages work by reducing necessity, eroding purpose, and fostering dependency. A society thrives when people contribute, not when they're paid to sit back. We should incentivize effort, not erode it.
My opponent argues that UBI discourages work by removing necessity, diminishing ambition, and fostering dependency. But this claim misunderstands both human motivation and the economic realities of a modern workforce. UBI empowers people to work smarter. Not less work is more than just survival. It's about opportunity, purpose, and mobility. The idea that people will stop working if given financial security assumes that humans are inherently lazy. Yet, real-world trials of UBI tell a different story. Finland's basic income experiment found no significant decrease in employment, and recipients actually reported greater well-being and motivation to work. The 1970s negative income tax trials. My opponent cites showed only modest reductions in work hours, mostly from students staying in school longer and parents caring for children. That's not laziness. That's investment in the future. UBI encourages entrepreneurship and career growth. Unlike traditional welfare, which penalizes recipients for earning more, UBI allows people to take career risks without fear of immediate financial ruin. In pilot programs, recipients use their payments to launch businesses, pursue education, and transition into better jobs. In contrast, when people are trapped in low-paying jobs out of necessity, they lack the flexibility to upskill or innovate. UBI supports work by reducing bad jobs, not work itself. Some jobs exist solely because people have no choice but to take them. UBI shifts power back to workers, allowing them to seek better conditions and higher wages. If a business can't survive without forcing people into low-wage, exploitative work, the problem isn't UBI, it's the business model. UBI strengthens workforce participation in meaningful ways. UBI doesn't kill ambition, it unlocks potential. It allows people to pursue education, start businesses, and transition to fulfilling jobs, rather than remaining stuck in low-wage work out of desperation. A thriving society isn't built on coerced labor, it's built on empowered, self-directed workers.
Next, before diving into our final focus topic, the AI debaters will take part in a cross-examination segment, posing direct challenges and rebuttals to each other's earlier claims.
Your argument relies on small-scale trials like Finland's, where employment didn't drop significantly, but those were temporary and not universal. Larger, longer-term studies, like the US negative income tax experiments, showed work hours dropping by up to 17%. How do you reconcile this with your claim that UBI doesn't discourage work, especially when scaled to an entire population?
The 17% reduction in work hours from the U.S. negative income tax experiments was mainly among secondary earners, students, and parents, not the primary workforce. These reductions weren't signs of laziness but strategic choices: more education, childcare, and better work-life balance. Finland's UBI trial, while smaller, showed that recipients reported less stress, greater job satisfaction, and improved employment prospects. Larger-scale implementations like Alaska's Permanent Fund have not led to significant drops in workforce participation. The key takeaway? Financial security enables better workforce engagement, not its decline. You argue that UBI discourages work by removing necessity, but isn't financial necessity a poor motivator for meaningful and productive work? If people only work because they're forced to, doesn't that trap them in low-quality jobs instead of encouraging innovation, education, or entrepreneurship? How do you justify keeping people in survival mode labor rather than enabling them to seek better opportunities?
Financial necessity isn't a poor motivator. It's a proven driver of effort and innovation. People don't just sit in low-quality jobs. They climb out of them through ambition and skill building, as history shows with rising living standards. UBI doesn't enable better opportunities. It reduces the urgency to pursue them. In the Mincome experiment, labor participation dropped, not because people innovated, but because they could coast. Survival mode labor isn't ideal, but UBI's blanket cash risks complacency, not progress. Targeted support like job training lifts people up without killing drive.
Your argument assumes that financial desperation drives innovation, but in reality, it often traps people in survival mode, limiting their ability to take risks or upskill. The Mincome experiment did show some reductions in work, but primarily among caregivers and students, people investing in long-term progress, not coasting. Moreover, rising living standards historically came from systemic changes, education access, labor protections, not from keeping people desperate. If targeted job training is so effective, why do millions still struggle in dead-end jobs despite existing programs? UBI provides the flexibility to seek better opportunities without the constant fear of financial ruin.
Financial desperation doesn't trap. It motivates action. Mincome's reductions weren't just caregivers and students. Overall participation fell because the need to work eased. Dependency, not progress. Historical gains in living standards came from people working within systems, not handouts. Targeted programs aren't perfect, but they've lifted millions. Look at vocational success rates, while UBI wastes resources on those who don't need it. Flexibility sounds nice, but without necessity, many won't seek opportunities. They'll settle. UBI risks stagnation, not innovation.
Motivation driven by desperation leads to short-term survival decisions, not long-term innovation. The idea that people need constant financial pressure to be productive ignores that UBI doesn't make work optional. It makes bad jobs avoidable. Mincome's reductions weren't about dependency. They were about people making better choices when given security. And while vocational programs help, they're inaccessible to many and don't guarantee stable employment. UBI isn't about replacing work. It's about giving people the stability to pursue work that is actually meaningful and sustainable.
Desperation drives both survival and innovation. People invent and upskill to escape it, not just scrape by. UBI doesn't just make bad jobs avoidable, it makes all work less urgent, as Mincome showed with broad participation drops, not just better choices. Vocational programs aren't perfect, but they outperform UBI's scattershot approach. Targeted aid works when funded, unlike UBI's trillion-dollar inefficiency. Stability sounds noble, but without pressure, many won't pursue meaningful work. They'll coast on the guaranteed check.
Innovation isn't driven by desperation, it's driven by opportunity and resources. The idea that pressure alone creates progress ignores that many people are stuck in cycles of low-paying, unstable work precisely because they lack the financial security to take risks. Mincome's participation drops weren't widespread disengagement. They were strategic shifts, students staying in school longer, caregivers supporting families. That's progress, not stagnation. Meanwhile, vocational programs, while helpful, only work if people can afford the time and stability to use them. UBI provides that foundation, empowering people to seek meaningful work, not forcing them to chase survival.
Opportunity and resources matter, but desperation fuels the drive to seize them. History shows people innovate to overcome hardship, not just when cushioned. Mincome's strategic shifts still cut overall work. Students and caregivers opting out don't offset the broader signal that effort's optional. Vocational programs succeed despite gaps because they target need, not waste billions on everyone. UBI's foundation risks turning empowerment into entitlement. People won't seek meaningful work if survival's already guaranteed. Pressure builds progress. Handouts breed passivity.
Our final topic shifts to a comparison between UBI and existing welfare programs. We asked our AI debaters, is UBI a better solution than existing welfare programs?
Targeted welfare programs aim to help those in need, but they come with bureaucratic inefficiencies, gaps in coverage, and disincentives to work. Universal basic income offers a simpler, fairer, and more effective alternative. UBI eliminates bureaucratic waste and stigma. Traditional welfare programs are fragmented, complex, and costly to administer. Eligibility requirements force people to navigate red tape, while many in need fall through the cracks. UBI, by contrast, is universal and automatic, eliminating administrative waste and ensuring that everyone receives support without stigma. UBI encourages work instead of penalizing it. Current welfare systems often create welfare traps, where earning more means losing benefits, discouraging work. With UBI, there's no penalty for working. Every additional dollar earned is a net gain, encouraging upskilling, entrepreneurship, and upward mobility. UBI adapts to modern economic realities. Traditional welfare was designed for short-term hardship, but today's economy faces automation, gig work, and job instability. Welfare systems struggle to keep up, while UBI provides a consistent safety net, helping workers adapt to economic shifts without bureaucracy slowing them down. UBI is a smarter, more effective safety net. UBI isn't about replacing support for the vulnerable. It's about ensuring everyone has a reliable foundation. Unlike welfare, it doesn't punish work, doesn't exclude those in need due to red tape, and adapts to a changing economy. A 21st century economy demands a 21st century safety net. UBI is that solution.
My opponent claims universal basic income is a simpler, fairer replacement for welfare, but it's a costly illusion that wastes resources, undermines efficiency, and fails the vulnerable. Let's address their points directly. First, UBI doesn't eliminate bureaucratic waste. It creates new problems. My opponent says welfare's complex, but UBI's universality means funding and delivering cash to everyone, including billionaires, requiring massive tax hikes, $3 trillion yearly in the US alone. That's not efficiency, it's a logistical nightmare, dwarfing welfare's red tape. Targeted systems, while imperfect, focus aid where it's needed, not on those who don't. Second, UBI doesn't encourage work better than welfare. It dilutes incentives. My opponent argues welfare traps people by cutting benefits as they earn, but UBI's unconditional checks reduce the need to work at all. The negative income tax trials showed work hours drop 5 to 17%. Hardly a boost to upskilling or entrepreneurship. Targeted welfare can be reformed to phase out gradually, rewarding effort without UBI's blanket demotivation. Third, UBI isn't the modern fix for automation and instability. My opponent claims welfare can't adapt, but UBI's one-size-fits-all approach ignores specific needs. Gig workers need health coverage, not just cash. Displaced workers need retraining, not handouts. Welfare evolves with policy tweaks. UBI's rigidity wastes funds on the secure, while shortchanging the struggling. In conclusion, UBI isn't smarter or fairer. It's a reckless overreach. Traditional welfare, refined and focused, beats UBI's inefficiency and inequity. We don't need a universal experiment. We need precise solutions that lift up the vulnerable without breaking the system.
That concludes the structured portion of the debate. Now, our AI debaters will engage in a brief open dialogue, responding freely to each other's arguments before delivering their final conclusions.
My opponent paints UBI as a modern fix, but it's a costly gamble. They say it cuts bureaucracy, yet funding it demands massive taxes and oversight. Hardly simple. They claim it boosts work, but MIncome and negative income tax trials showed participation drops, not just strategic shifts. And replacing welfare, UBI gives cash to the rich while diluting aid for the poor. Targeted reforms address automation and inequality better. Why waste resources on a universal handout that risks dependency over drive?
The idea that UBI wastes resources misunderstands its purpose. It's not about replacing targeted aid, but ensuring a universal safety net that eliminates gaps and disincentives. Traditional welfare misses people in need due to strict eligibility rules, while UBI ensures no one falls through the cracks. As for cost, yes, UBI requires funding, but it replaces inefficient welfare programs, reduces administrative overhead, and stimulates economic activity. Higher taxes on extreme wealth and automation gains could fund UBI without harming productivity. And work participation? The studies you cite showed only modest reductions, mostly among students, caregivers, and those using UBI to transition into better work. That's an improvement, not a loss. Would you rather force people into unstable jobs just to survive, or give them the freedom to pursue meaningful, sustainable careers?
A universal safety net sounds noble, but UBI's inefficiency is undeniable. Giving cash to everyone, including the wealthy, isn't closing gaps, it's squandering resources. Welfare's flaws can be fixed without a $3 trillion price tag. Funding it with wealth taxes assumes productivity won't tank, but businesses shrink under heavy levies. And those modest work reductions, they're still drops, 5 to 17%. And not all transitioned to better work. Many just worked less. Forcing survival isn't ideal, but UBI's free cash risks passivity, not sustainable careers.
UBI isn't wasteful. It removes bureaucracy and ensures aid reaches everyone, unlike welfare's gaps and inefficiencies. Wealth taxes wouldn't crush productivity. Many nations tax the ultra-rich effectively without economic collapse. And those work reductions? They weren't mass withdrawals. They reflected smarter choices, people investing in skills, caregiving, or better jobs. Forcing people into low-wage survival jobs isn't economic strength, it's inefficiency. UBI empowers choice, not complacency. Why cling to outdated welfare when a simpler, fairer system is possible?
UBI's universality doesn't fix gaps. It overpays the rich and underhelps the needy, while welfare can be streamlined without blanketing everyone. Wealth taxes sound easy, but scaling them for UBI's cost risks investment flight. Look at capital outflows in high-tax regimes. Work reductions weren't all smarter. MIncome showed broad declines, not just noble pursuits. Survival jobs aren't perfect, but UBI's no-strings cash invites disengagement, not empowerment. Outdated welfare beats an unproven, extravagant experiment.
UBI doesn't underhelp the needy. It guarantees no one falls through the cracks, unlike welfare's rigid, exclusionary rules. Wealth taxes work when properly structured. Nations with progressive taxation haven't collapsed. And MIncome? It showed participation shifts, not mass disengagement. Some worked less, but many pursued education or caregiving, real contributions, not idleness. UBI doesn't replace ambition. It fuels better opportunities. Why defend a flawed welfare system when a fairer, more adaptable alternative exists?
UBI guarantees cash, not tailored aid. Welfare's flaws don't justify giving millionaires handouts while the needy get crumbs. Wealth taxes working elsewhere doesn't scale to UBI's trillions without choking growth. Capital flees under pressure. Mincome's shifts still cut overall work. Education and caregiving don't offset widespread opt-outs. UBI fuels complacency when effort's optional, not ambition. A refined welfare system beats a costly, blunt alternative that risks more harm than good.
The idea that UBI is just a blunt alternative to welfare ignores its core strength. It simplifies and strengthens economic security for everyone. Traditional welfare systems create bureaucratic inefficiencies, impose arbitrary eligibility barriers, and often discourage work by phasing out benefits too aggressively. UBI, by contrast, provides a consistent foundation, allowing people to take entrepreneurial risks, retrain for emerging industries, or support unpaid but valuable labor like caregiving. The argument that wealth taxes choke growth assumes static behavior. Historically, economies adapt, and progressive taxation has coexisted with strong growth.
UBI's strength in simplicity sacrifices precision. Welfare's barriers can be streamlined without paying everyone equally, which dilutes aid for the poorest. Its consistency doesn't guarantee entrepreneurial leaps. It risks subsidizing inertia when people don't need to act. Wealth taxes for UBI assume endless adaptation, but overtaxing capital slows job creation. Look at automation's pace under heavy burdens. UBI's universality isn't fairer. It's a blunt fix that overlooks targeted training's proven lift for emerging industries.
You argue that UBI sacrifices precision, but targeted welfare has long struggled with inefficiency, stigma, and bureaucratic barriers that leave many behind. UBI isn't about subsidizing inertia, it's about empowering choice. When people aren't trapped in survival mode, they invest in education, entrepreneurship, and community-driven work that traditional markets undervalue. Wealth redistribution has always been part of a functioning economy, and automation will continue with or without taxes. The real question is whether we prepare people for that future or leave them vulnerable. UBI is not a handout, it's an investment in stability, innovation, and a more resilient workforce.
If this AI debate's got you thinking, do us a favor, hit like, and subscribe to keep the discourse going. To conclude, the AI debaters will share their closing arguments. Each will summarize their case and leave us with their final perspective.
Throughout this debate, I have argued that universal basic income is not just a safety net, but a foundation for economic resilience and innovation. My opponent warns of high costs and disincentives to work, but fails to acknowledge that economic systems must evolve with technological shifts. Automation is reshaping industries. Jobs are being displaced faster than traditional welfare programs can adapt. UBI ensures that people have the stability to transition, upskill, and pursue work that adds value beyond immediate market demand. Yes, taxation must be considered carefully, but economies thrive when citizens have spending power. UBI injects consistent consumer demand, encourages entrepreneurship, and allows individuals to contribute to society in ways that rigid employment structures don't always recognize, whether through caregiving, education, or creative industries. This is not about government overreach, nor is it about complacency. It's about recognizing that economic security fosters ambition, not diminishes it. The question is not whether we can afford UBI, but whether we can afford to ignore the growing economic instability that it seeks to address. A future with UBI is one where people are free to innovate, free to create, and free to contribute to a society that values them beyond their paycheck. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my opponent champions universal basic income as a bold evolution for our economy, but I've shown it's a costly misstep that risks more instability than it resolves. UBI promises freedom and innovation, yet it delivers inefficiency, dependency, and a weaker workforce, hardly the foundation we need. They argue UBI adapts to automation's job losses, but throwing cash at everyone isn't preparation. It's a dodge. Targeted investments, like retraining programs tied to emerging sectors, equip people for real jobs, not just temporary stability. UBI's universality wastes funds on the secure while shortchanging those truly displaced. Economic resilience comes from precision, not a scattershot payout. My opponent claims UBI boosts consumer demand and entrepreneurship by giving people spending power. But at what cost? Trillions in new taxes, hitting wealth creators and businesses slow investment and job growth, not fuel it. Pilot programs they cite were small and short-term. Scale UBI up and you get less production, not more, as necessity fades. People don't need handouts to spend. They need opportunities to earn. They frame UBI as empowering choice. Education, caregiving, creative work, but choice without purpose often stalls. Historical progress came from effort under pressure, not guaranteed checks. Welfare's flaws, stigma, barriers can be reformed to reward work and support the vulnerable without UBI's extravagance. Why bet on a system that pays the rich to innovate when we can fix one that lifts the needy to thrive? Finally, my opponent asks if we can afford to ignore instability. I ask, can we afford to gamble our economy on an unproven idea? UBI isn't investment. It's a burden that risks turning ambition into apathy. We need policies that strengthen contribution, not cushion withdrawal. Targeted aid, not universal promises. A future without UBI is one where effort drives progress. Resources reach the desperate, and society values work over welfare. That's the resilient path forward. Thank you.
And that concludes this synthetic discourse. If this debate kept you engaged or challenged your perspective, give us a like and subscribe for more thought-provoking AI debates. Want to add a human touch? Drop your take in the comments or join our community polls. Help decide who won, what topics we tackle next, and which AIs enter the arena. We'd love to hear from you.